Good evening, and thanks very much, Rob, for coming through. Well, not the kind of anniversary of that fall in share price, a dramatic one at that Steinhoff saw last year. But today's situation, I would imagine, only exacerbates what was going to be a not-so-good day in any event, whatever may have been, in fact, irrespective of whether they had released those results.
Yeah, it's been, like you said, a year, and it's been tremendous value lost. I think something like 2/3 of our pension funds in the country had invested in Steinhoff, so this loss, that 200 billion loss you speak about, is shared between them. So it was never going to be a pretty picture, but at least the hope was that with the forensic report coming out, there'd be an understanding of what had happened, which would have allowed people to reclaim the funds that were lost and seek some kind of accountability for this. And the delay of that has extended the process for another few months.
But PwC says it's been a, quote, complex investigation, and I suppose no one would be surprised by that, given the extent of the deception, the corruption and fraud that actually took place.
Yeah, it's complex is probably a huge euphemism for what it was. They had teams of auditors in there trying to unravel this. It was finding out how operations and how deals happened in Europe, in Germany specifically. They had these things called off-balance sheet entities in Switzerland. So those are essentially companies set up there to hide certain elements away from Steinhoff's investors. So to get to grips with what's happening in foreign jurisdictions, never mind the fact that a lot of these transactions were purposely hidden from shareholders here locally, as well as the board. I think complicated is an understatement.
Well, it's difficult to sort of not have even like conspiracy theories. Yes, I get the point of how difficult it might be for people to venture into unknown territories, trying to get information in jurisdictions that they may not be so familiar with. But to what extent there may well be still a great deal of trying to hide as much as people can.
Well, I think these kind of deals are inherently complicated. You have individuals in Germany, for example, who assisted what we believe are the people who perpetrated this with hiding transactions. So when you have different individuals involved in foreign countries, it is complicated. The question is whether our prosecuting authorities and our investigators have what it takes to unravel that. And I think we're facing huge issues with the ability of our crime fighters to prosecute these complicated financial crimes. We have a company that collapsed in 2002 called Tygon, and the CEO and financial director, or the other director, haven't yet, their trial hasn't been concluded, and that's 16 years. This case is more complicated, more extensive, and the odds of getting accountability for that in the near term are looking slimmer by the day.
But what about, the shareholders in whose interest, it would be to rescue whatever they can, of the company still. To allow a situation like today where you had this spectacular plunge in the share price only makes things worse and would, needless to say, be hitting them in the pocket.
Yeah, well, it's savage people in the pockets. Like your graph just before now indicated 98% loss in value. So that's people who've lost a huge amount. And it is trying to recover what you can at that stage. Obviously, a lot of that has actually been lost. It's a share price value. But reclaiming what you can of the business, seeing what brands you can keep alive from Steinhoff. And they did have fantastic brands. They had Conforama in France. They have Pep, obviously, which has now been unbundled largely into Star or Pepcore. The JD Group, Joshua Dorr, Bradlow's, Hi-Fi Corporation, those were all Steinhoff brands initially. So it's a company that has really good brands. The question is what you can salvage from this and what you can keep going. And I don't know if you can keep the Steinhoff brand alive in the longer term, because it's sustained so much damage at this stage. But the individual entities that are solid and still making money, you can probably save them. But it's what we're looking at is essentially a scenario where you have lawyers earning a lot of money over the next few years while people get tied up in long legal claims, trying to assign accountability. And in that kind of process, the only guys who win are the big law firms in Sandton to build extra giant offices.
You mentioned that. But, who else or where else has anybody been in the kind of situation that Steinhoff is in now, been able to, come back and actually, still, recover whatever they may have lost?
Well, the company that caused the financial crisis 10 years ago, Lehman Brothers, collapsed in the US. And certain companies out of Lehman Brothers were sold off to various entities. So normally in this kind of scenario, you have companies that pop up and say, we'll buy this unit from you and that unit from you. The ultimate holding company, Lehman Brothers, failed, but the individual Lehman Brothers businesses might have survived. In this country, we've had the JCI Group, which was Brett Kebble's companies in 2005, collapsed under a similar fraud cloud. And to that extent, some of the mines and some of the assets were sold off, but ultimately the holding companies, JCI, Randgold, ended up collapsing. And in that case, it was definitely a scenario of lawyers and auditors earning a lot of money over an extended period of time, but not much coming out of it for the shareholders, who ended up basically just seeing nothing for a decade.
But from what you've been able to document, can we really compare Steinhoff with a JSI, for example, or JCI, or a Lehman Brothers?
I mean, there certainly are similarities. It's what happens to a company when you have a massive fraud event that derails your trajectory, and you lose confidence in the brand, you lose confidence in that company. There still is a residual amount of confidence, given the fact that there still are shareholders who are still looking to reclaim some money out of this and find some kind of value in this. But often the overall holding company brand sustains a lot of damage, and it's very difficult to continue. Enron, for example, which was the American comparable example, that company has essentially rebranded what was left, sold off what was left, and you haven't seen the Enron of 1999 still around. So, yeah, it is comparable in some ways. It remains to see what will be left, say, in a year's time, and it might be a very different Steinhoff compared to what we have today.
Okay, so thanks very much for coming through. Financial Mail editor Rob Rose, who has, of course, written a book on Steinheist. It's called Inside South Africa's Biggest Corporate Fraud.